mics are hot. The mics are hot. Ben Griffin, welcome back. Welcome back. If you were watching this after the fact of it being recorded, these questions are being submitted by H-Hour subscribers. If you want to submit questions for the guest, and they're watching this live actually right now as well. If you want to watch live or submit questions for the guest, you can do so by becoming a subscriber. In the blurb of this episode is the link to go and do that. So we've got a shed load of questions to get through, and we've got the full podcast to do. So I'm keen to get started. Let's get into it, mate. The first time you've spoken publicly since the last time we spoke, 6 years ago.
I'm pretty sure of that. I mean, I'm sure someone could Google that and work it out, but yeah.
Okay, I think you may be correct. I know there's a couple of questions in here which are mentioning that. So we'll get into the questions. Okay, the first set of questions, if we get through them all, is from a subscriber, Coke, and he caveats it first by saying, Ben, before my questions, which may appear challenging, I want you to know, I think you're a good man who's done a lot of good. He greatly respects your moral courage for speaking out publicly despite the risk of prison and telling your CO you wouldn't redeploy despite being expected to be imprisoned and ostracized. He wishes you well and hopes this interview is helpful to you and those who will watch it. I hope so too. Okay, question number 1. In your Frontline Club talk on YouTube, you said you have a moral... What are you laughing at?
How am I supposed to remember?
No,
it's fine, but I'm just thinking... I'm not going to remember any of this.
Don't worry about it. Just remember what you can. Like I said, I went through and listened to our first interview. Last week when I did it?
Yeah.
Back then, and I was thinking, my God, I don't remember half of this. And I actually thought...
When you were in the sixth form in Swansea, come on.
Yeah. Okay, in your Frontline Club talk on YouTube, you said you have a moral duty to tell people how it is. Why do you refuse to do more interviews of your experience, especially on other big podcasts which you've turned down?
Because where am I? I mean, there's many ways of putting this, but you could say in effect, I've retired.
Say that again.
That I've retired.
Retired.
Yeah. So I guess I know where the questions are coming from. The guys who got in touch, that's the only request I've had for years, and obviously been in touch with yourself here over the years, more keeping in touch rather than on a sort of a work basis. And you've always said, "Oh, when you get back on the podcast, I want to get you back on the podcast," and I kind of resisted it, and
for years, Ben.
Yeah, and I've had the perfect excuse since leaving London that I said, if I'm back in London, I'll do it. And then obviously you put me in touch with these guys in America. I've seen a couple of the podcasts, they're, good guys and all the rest of it. But when you put that request to me to go on their podcast, in the front of my mind was that I've said that I would come back on your podcast, and I've been putting it off. So there's no way I could go on their podcast.
Oh, I wouldn't have minded that.
No, but I would have minded. I can't say to people, I'm not going on podcasts and then go on a podcast. And so the reason I've come back on yours is because you've consistently asked me since the day I came on this podcast to come back on, and I've consistently said no. And I did promise you that if I was back in London, I would come back on. And obviously that came round. So I couldn't really avoid it. But it's not about sort of picking and choosing or even prioritizing one thing over another. It's like you and I have a lot of personal connections outside of this in terms of common friends, let's say, common experiences. And, so I'm more inclined to come back on your podcast because you would ask me so often to come back, and so there's nothing in it, there really isn't anything in it. And
I'm the best one, mate. I'm the best. What are you laughing at? No, I appreciate that, and it makes sense. It makes total sense. Okay, follow up to that then. So, don't you feel like you have an obligation to the civilians you helped be tortured to spread awareness? Meaningful good could be achieved, like helping to change people's views and raise money for charity. But you're retired now, right? You're retired.
The thing is, as well, is that from 2005 to 2019, I had two jobs. I had my day job, and I had let's just call it the activist job, or the speaking out job, or the doing endless interviews and all the rest of it. And that was for 14 years. You know, I think I sort of like got to the end of that on a personal level. There's only so many times you can say the same things, and there's only so many times you can give the same talk. You know, I said everything I needed to say. I helped, you know, and I'm not going to sort of bring this out into the open, but, you know, the people and organizations and institutions that I help behind the scenes, you know, that's a long list, you know, and you get to a point in your life where you think there's nothing more that I can give to this. You know, there's nothing more for me to say. The relevant people know everything. I could go on a podcast every week and say the same thing again and again, but it's all there. You know, like you can go back and find all this. And at some point, you know, like you get to the point where, you know, no matter what you do in life, things come to an end. You know, professional footballers don't play professional football forever. You know, things come to an end.
Mm-hmm.
And this came to an end, you know, in sort of 2019, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. You got to balance it between the value you're putting into the cause versus what it's taking from you personally.
The other thing
right?
is that you can look at this at an individual level and an institutional level. Is that just pick a cause, right? Pick any cause, and you'll get spokespeople for that cause, whether they're official or unofficial, or whether they're just the go-to person that the media's always going to, or the go-to person for to speak in public on a certain issue, you know. So, and you've had people on this podcast like that, you know, like, right, I need someone in about the arms industry, I'll go to this guy. I need someone in about whatever the issue is, I'll go to this person. Over the years, I saw that there were issues that actually became sort of worn out in a way because it was always the same person. Oh, it's just them. They always say this.
That's a great point. It becomes stale. Yeah, the same fit. You know, it's a great point.
You've got to give room for other people to come through. You know, you've got to give. Sometimes you've got to stand aside and let other people step forward if they're there. You know, you can dominate a space and be the only person that people speak to on certain issues. And, you know, since 2019, obviously, behind the scenes, there's been a lot of Special Forces guys who've come out, or not come out, who have started to talk about what's been happening behind the scenes. You know, that might not be in the public domain, but that's definitely happening over the last 5 years.
Yeah, it's a good point about the same face. You know, yeah, go and stay like that. Okay, question. Next question. All right, tough one. From Coke again. You said you'd be willing to plead guilty if put on trial for attacking civilians. It would follow then that your former SAS colleagues deserve to be imprisoned as they attacked and knowingly delivered civilians for torture too. Would you testify against them to achieve this? I am glad you are getting asked that question.
Yeah, sure. I mean,
and not me getting asked that kind of question.
Yeah.
My God.
So what we're talking about here is what are we talking about? See, the thing about all questions is they they narrow the focus. They bring things in to a very specific point and then say, what would you do about this?
Lacking context, is that you?
No, not lacking context. But what I'm trying to say here is, so the question is very specific. Would I testify against my former comrades in a court if they were accused and on trial for their complicity in the torture of civilians? But see, what that leaves out of the room, out of the question, out of the courtroom, as it were, the metaphorical courtroom or the hypothetical courtroom, is the other people involved. So, one of my points of view about this is that all too often, when there's been wrongdoing by soldiers, as in this example, or the police, or any state forces, what happens is there's some sort of inquiry or some sort of case, some sort of legal action, some sort of investigation, and then a few people are in effect picked out and punished for something that is systematic. So, yeah, you could pick out some soldiers and put them on trial for the capture of civilians who were subsequently tortured. But where does that stop, really? Because the people who always get away with this are the politicians, the generals, the policymakers, the people who are completely aware of what's happening, but are at 1 step, 2 step, 3 steps removed. So, yeah.
Okay. But would you?
Would I what?
Testify?
The thing is for what?
Depends on the circumstance, right? Depends on a lot of variables.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure where that gets anyone. I'm not sure where that really gets anyone. What? So we pick out a few guys and prosecute them for what? We could say the same for Afghanistan. Pick out a few guys who killed civilians in Afghanistan and punish them now. Doesn't.
Let's carry on this topic at the start of the podcast, because obviously what we got going on now with stuff in the news about SF, because there's this interest. You raising some interesting questions in my mind about it. What does it achieve? It doesn't achieve nothing, that's for sure. But let's come on to that. Let's come on to that later on. All right, so we're gonna switch to questions. There's a bunch more from Coke. We will get around to them either on this or in the full podcast. We're gonna switch to questions from David now. David's the producer of the podcast, and he has submitted a bunch of great questions here. So, question from David: He left the SAS in 2005, citing trigger-happy tactics by American forces and the moral impact of detainee abuse. How did your insider military experience shape your decision to go public? And do you ever regret not pursuing institutional change from within?
I have no idea how much. Was it military training influenced? What was that, the first part?
How did your insider military experience shape your decision to go public?
To go public.
Do you regret not trying to bring about change from within? So staying in the unit and trying to bring about correct change that way, if that was possible. Like, struggle to see.
So I've got no idea how. It's very easy, or it's not easy. It's what we fall into is someone asks us a question, and then we put together an answer. We put together an answer by, thinking back towards the time, and then trying to work out what we were thinking at the time, or what was important at the time, and all the rest of it. But then we can't escape the fact that we know stuff since then, don't we? We found out things since then. Like since that time, since 2005, we found out all sorts of things, right?
No, from when you were in. Talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, how did my military insider experience?
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's flick to the second part of the question.
Well, no, let's continue this because it's interesting. But
So how did your insider military experience shape your decision to go public?
I don't know. I I don't know how that would have shaped that, as opposed to not having that military experience.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, I see what I mean.
I'm not sure where he's getting at, but
No, I see what you mean. All right. So, but do you think it could have been achievable to bring about institutional change from within?
there's no way of knowing. I doubt it.
I doubt it too. Yeah,
I doubt it. Yeah.
Too, yeah. Yeah. You need a lot of rank, a lot of influence, a lot of civilians and politicians on side as well to bring about that level of institutional change. I think and you need them to think it's needed.
I think there's a bigger question than that, though. It's about cultural change. So let's not forget that it's the British government and all sorts of organisations and institutions within British society that pushes for war. It's not as straightforward as picking out a few individuals who are responsible for it. So that's huge, isn't it? Because if you look back over 300 years of British history, that's what we do. We go to war, so we see military solutions to problems.
Yeah,
you
think more so than other countries?
No, I'm just saying that it's a big part of what we are as a country.
Mm.
I'm not comparing that, but so it's part of what we do, isn't it? I don't think there's any denying that, it's part of what we do as a country.
Yeah, I think the reasons why have changed a lot over time. I think it went from us being the lead to us being the led.
I think there's a belief in the if there's a belief that there are military solutions to problems. There's an underlying belief in that, whether it's led by America or pushed by us. There's a belief that military force can bring about solutions, and that's deeply embedded in our culture. So it's not just about changing the military. That's our whole culture's like that.
Yeah, but that's not incorrect.
What's not incorrect?
To say that military action can bring about solutions.
Well, that's where we would disagree, isn't it? So.
Well, no, it can. It just shouldn't. It shouldn't be the go-to every time. It shouldn't be the first choice.
We'll disagree on that one. We'll disagree on that one. I mean, so, like a whole hours and hours that could go into that. But no, it is a default, almost a default setting for the British state and our culture. I
don't know if I agree with that anymore. We'll come back onto that. Okay, last question for the icebreaker before we got to the main podcast. When we got to the main podcast, we're going to carry on with these questions.
How is this different from the main podcast?
Because I'd normally leave leftover questions until the end of the main podcast.
Right.
But there's normally only a few.
Right.
And there's loads, yeah. All right, so, okay, question 2 from David. In 2008, you were legally enjoined from speaking about extraordinary rendition and Iraqi detainee mistreatment, an unusual restriction on a former soldier. Do you think this was a matter of preserving confidentiality, or was it political censorship?
Yes. Well, if anyone's
6 years since you did an interview, mate, you're getting thrown at the deep end, yeah.
It certainly is. Look, if anyone's interested in that, they can Google, MOD versus Ben Griffin in the High Court.
What do you think it was? Confidentiality? Preserving confidentiality or political censorship?
It was political censorship.
Did that affect your ability to be an effective activist? Or did it actually shine a light on it?
I'm not there. I know there's going to be a lot of this. I don't know, because I really don't know. You know, like, it's impossible to know. They're almost like hypothetical questions, aren't they? You know, like,
do you feel like
how
you
much
could have been more
something...
effective as an activist if it hadn't have happened? Do you think? Not would you, but would you think you could have? I suppose there's more details you could have divulged, right?
I think that these things that we go through are things like the High Court trial. They reveal things that you would never have known, or never understood, or whole ways of doing things and whole aspects of society that you're unaware of, ways that things work, and connections, you know, and who runs what, and, you know, how you learn a little bit more about how this country works. And so all of these things that happen to us, if we're able to maintain some sort of observation as we're going through them, not just with our eyes, but, you know, like, if we're able to sort of maintain some sort of awareness of what's happening, they can be very revealing. And so I think one of the questions earlier is, you know, something about regrets of whatever it was. But I have no regrets about anything in life as a whole. All of it has value. Even things that are perceived at the time as terrible things, perceived at the time as fantastic things, you know, wonderful things, sorrowful things, they all have an incredible value. It's all part of living, you know.
I totally agree. We were talking off air, before we wrap this icebreaker, we were talking off air. I was saying how much I've changed since we last, you know, my outlook on life and world politics and everything has just changed so much since the last time we spoke. And that's one of the ways it's changed, is my mindset has turned to that. It's like every experience we have is invaluable. And what's more, it's those experiences that make us unique. No one else has got your background or experiences or perception of things, because only you could have experienced the things you experienced in the way you did.
Yeah.
You know, it's super invaluable. And what's that phrase? You can't, in order to have the sweet, you got to have the bitter. You can't have the sweet without the bitter, you know?
Yeah. But also, we all have unique, you could even say we all have a unique version of events in a way, because even, so anyway, but far too often we forget that everyone else has a unique version of events as well, you know. And sometimes we get into this game of prioritizing one person's version of events over another, or giving more credibility or more weight to these different versions of events, where actually, you know, who's to say, you know, which one should have more weight? Not that any should have more weight over the other, but we get into this thing, you know, like, you've invited me on this podcast, and part of that is because I used to be in the SAS. That should have, in my view, no bearing on people taking what I say seriously or not. You know, that I happen to serve in a particular military unit once upon a time.
Well, you say that, mate, but you've got experiences and a unique insight on things that most people will never have.
But that's what I'm trying to get across, is that that all of us have these unique experiences. All of us have these unique experiences. That's just, yeah.
I know what you mean. Let's pause here. If you are listening to this on your podcast app or watching it on YouTube after the live link is done, as in you listen to this after the fact, this episode's going to roll straight into the full podcast with Ben. In that podcast, probably early on in it, we're going to carry on with the questions from the subscribers, and let it flick around to the next episode. Okay, we're going to take a pause. We might try and get a coffee without you spilling it this time. I'm going to get a toilet break. Right, back in 5 or 6 minutes.